So the decision to work on your body is a mind-driven decision. The decision to persist and keep working on your body in terms of exercise, healthy eating, all that kind of thing, that is mind-driven. And then so you make the decision, you do the exercise, you eat the healthy food, mind-driven. You can't use your body without your mind because you're dead. So if you look at it like that, your first step is to make the decision with your mind to look after your body, and then to actually do what you need to do to look after your body. And that then feeds back into the mind. And that's a level of the mind brain body relationship. And then on top of that, we're also using our mind to deal with our thoughts and to deal with our reactions to life and understand what we've been exposed to and how that impacts us.
Dr. Leaf, welcome back to the Superhuman Life.
So good to be back with you, Frank. It's been a while.
Yeah, two plus years. I mean, still our episode on how to use your mind to heal your brain and body has been one of our most downloaded, most shared, most viewed across all the platforms. So honored to have you back here today and really dive more into your new book. But I want to start off here with a congratulations. I saw a recent post that you are a first-time grandmother. Is that accurate?
Yes, I am. I'm so excited. It's our first granddaughter was born last Thursday morning. So, and I was there for the whole birth. And so, we just actually flew back to Miami 2 days ago. So we've been with her and go back next week. So it's wonderful. It's a great experience.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, family is one of our core values here. And I think the timing of the book, I don't know if you planned this, like I'm going to launch it right around the time of a new child coming into the world. Like, did you have any idea like it was going to be this close?
No, it was all like everything was preset with the book already, and then my daughter fell pregnant, and it all kind of just came into the same time frame. So it's great because the book's for babies, well, not for babies, but for 2 through parents for 2 through 10-year-olds. And so in 1 week we literally had 2 babies birthed.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, let's dive right in. I've heard recently you describe your field of study or the work that you do in the area of psychoneurobiology. I'd love for you to maybe unpack a little bit about what that actually is and what attracted you to psychoneurobiology work.
So that is, the psycho stands for mind, neuro for brain, biology for body. And there's 3 separate components that work together to create the networks that drive how we function as human beings. And we are able to control that network. And so the work that I do and have been doing for 38 years now is understanding how that network works and how we can influence and make the necessary changes in the networks that drive us. So if there's something that's driving us in the wrong direction and creating disruption in our life, leading to more extreme mental health challenges, to be able to recognize those signals and then to track that back to the source and in the mind, brain, and body, and then to reconstruct that. So psychoneurobiology looks at how to do that, and it specifically looking at how does information get into the mind, brain, body network and how they're connected. So if my mind is messy, and I'm having a messy experience and not managing that, what does that look like in the brain? What does that look like in the body? And how does that play out into our life? And then how can we control that? So it's a form of it's basically falls under the realm of neuroscience, but it's much more specific, where it's not just neuroscience. Classical neuroscience looks at brain producing mind. This is looking at, no, the brain can't produce the mind because the brain's a physical organ. When you die, your brain dies. So your mind is separate from your brain, and it actually drives your brain and drives your body and therefore the outputs.
Absolutely. I love all that. And I think what I'm hearing from what you said is it's really the mind that is driving all of this. Like if you have a messy, unhealthy mind, it's going to lead to an unhealthy, messy body. Now, does it work in reverse though? I'm a fitness guy, got a background in health and fitness, competed in bodybuilding, did a lot of fitness coaching. I've always believed that, you can't have a healthy mind without a healthy body. Would that fall into your understanding, or at least what you've uncovered in the research?
Well, yes. So in a way, yes, it's more of a feedback loop. So mind is first. So mind is good. After mind, you're dead. So your mind is your aliveness. So the decision to work on your body is a mind-driven decision. The decision to persist and keep working on your body in terms of exercise, healthy eating, all that kind of thing, that is mind-driven. And then so you make the decision, you do the exercise, you eat the healthy food, mind-driven. You can't use your body without your mind because you're dead. So if you look at it like that, your first step is to make the decision with your mind to look after your body. and then to actually do what you need to do to look after your body. And that then feeds back into the mind. And that's a level of the mind brain body relationship. And then on top of that, we're also using our mind to deal with our thoughts and to deal with our reactions to life and understand what we've been exposed to and how that impacts us, which is also mind driven. So it's always mind first and then brain and body. And then there's feedback. So if we don't look after our brain and our body, and we don't manage our mind, or if we're managing our mind, but we're not looking after the brain and the body, then the mind's got to work through a damaged brain and body, which makes it so much more difficult. Also, if our brain and body are unhealthy, it's feeding back and increasing the messiness in the mind. So it works both ways. Once you're dead, none of that counts. But basically, while you're alive, we need to be recognizing with our mind the impact of a brain and body that's not healthy, and recognize that, okay, this could be contributing to my mind issues, make a decision of my mind to address the brain and body health. And then if there's still stuff left over, which there always is, because that's just how we are as humans, then address that level of the mental health challenge or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
We spent a lot of time on this on the last episode, but I think that for me at least, there was a point where we looked at mind and brain almost as interchangeable, right? Are there still areas of science or still people that see it? Because the way that you're explaining it, it's like the mind is completely separate. Like that's what drives our aliveness. Like when did we begin to understand that there was a separation of these two?
So this is ancient, thousands of years. For thousands of years, there was always the understanding from the ancient philosophers and the spiritual teachers and all those texts that the mind and the brain were separate. And it was only honestly, in around 50 years ago, and kind of, I actually think it's less. It's around, it's not, I think, from the science, it's a little bit more like 40 years ago, with the advent of understanding brain technology, that we started thinking, started seeing, well, not we, I don't do that, but there was a branch of science started seeing, specifically neuroscience, that now we can look inside the brain. Therefore, the brain is the organ of mental health. Therefore, the brain is producing thoughts. The brain is free will is an illusion. And a whole sort of body of science grew in the last 40 years. The advent of brain technology was around the mid 90s, and it's pretty much from the mid 90s till now that neuroscientific approach became very, very dominant. It's because it's easy to measure because you can see things, but the measurements have been actually pretty inaccurate because you can't really look at a any kind of brain technology and say, well, that means that you're thinking this, or you're not reading your thoughts. We also can't look at how a person is showing up and saying, oh, well, it's because of some sort of mechanical damage in the brain. Sure, a mechanical damage in the brain from a traumatic brain injury or sports injury will definitely impact your emotions. And from that, and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and those kinds of birth trauma, they definitely will impact, obviously, cognitive, emotional, et cetera, et cetera. But when we talk about people's mental health and we've eliminated those potential physical contributors, we're left with people in life and their life experiences. And because our life experiences are experienced by the mind, and the mind puts them into the brain as a form of energy, and the brain then is activated to respond. That is the correct way around. It's not the other way around. And the evidence for that is there's so much evidence for that. Because if you take, like, the standard neuroscientific experiment will be along the lines of, let's getting people in a lab and getting them to do something, and then looking at how their brain is responding. The interpretation of that is, oh, the brain made them do it, but they first had to do something and be alive and do something like answer some questions or look at some pictures. So they were doing something with their aliveness, and the brain measurement was the response that was being measured. So we've got to look at it. What came first? It's a chicken and egg situation. In this case, the mind comes first, and the brain is basically responding. It's not causing. And so that's where it's a pretty new thing. It's only the last 40 years that people have seen the mind and brain as the same thing.
Yeah, but it's what I'm hearing you talk about though. It's for me as a coach, somebody that works with a lot of guys that are trying to break through and transform in their lives. A lot of times people play victim to circumstances, victim to past events, victim to trauma. They're like, these things happen to me, so I have these conditions in my brain or in my body, and I can't change. And it's like, no, you always have the choice. You always have the decision. It sounds like, the mind is our ultimate source of responsibility.
I love how you said that. It is because our mind has got different levels, and we have the messy mind, which is the one that we do life with. It's the one that we consciously aware, the conscious connection and being aware. Then we have our wise mind, which is pretty much what we call our non-conscious mind in science, and that works 24/7, and it's driving how we function. But it also plays a massive protective role. It's where our wisdom resides, and wisdom is something that protects us. Wisdom is something that's always looking for what are the things that are tripping us up. And it scans all the memories that are clustered into thoughts, because memories are details that are clustered into, like memories are grouped together into these thought patterns or thought networks that look like trees. And your non-conscious mind's always scanning those 24/7, find what's disruptive, and then it sends signals, channels signals through the subconscious, which is like a little bridge or a doorway into the conscious mind. And the reason it sends those through is that, okay, this, it identifies, hey, this is disruptive, this way of thinking, or this thing that you've been exposed to, or this thing that you're thinking about too much, or whatever, is getting strong, because whatever you're thinking about is growing in your brain and in your mind and in your body. And so the non-conscious mind scans what the messy mind is growing. And then it sends signals through to say, hey, pay attention, because this is disrupting your thought life, it's disrupting your relationships, it's whatever it is. And we as humans use our wise mind to stand back and observe our messy mind via our signals, and then we can change things. And that's really, I mean, it's actually that simple. It's hard to do, but to understand it is that simple. I mean, people, when you said like people get stuck, that is so true, because whatever you think about the most will grow, and it's growing in three places. So if you are constantly looking at a certain type of whatever, like social media, you're stuck on social media, or you're reading a certain type of whatever you're focusing on the most is growing. It's growing literally because that your mind reads it, your mind puts it into your brain as an energy wave. That energy waves creates all kinds of neurochemical and energetic and genetic responses in the brain. And then that means a genetic response is then something's made. Genes result in creation of material, and that material is amino acids that form proteins. And those proteins hold the information in the form of vibrations. And so the more information that comes in, the more proteins are needed, and those proteins join together and grow into branch-like structures. And these are the thought networks that are made of this information, which is memories, all clustered together. And so whatever you're thinking about is then adding more and more and more, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that if it's good, great, it's going to grow your brain health and your body health and your mind health and your sharpen optimization levels in your life. But if it's toxic, in any way, and there's different levels of toxicity on a scale of 1 to 10, that is going to get bigger and disrupt your physiological functioning, which is the psychoneurobiology aspect. It's going to disrupt brain function. It's going to disrupt messy mind function. It's going to make the mind even more messy. So there's that feedback loop going. And some of the research I do shows that, and we can talk about that in a moment. But essentially, we can see when someone isn't managing their mind, we will see. I use QEEG, myself and my team, for our neuroscience research, because it shows us millions of reactions in a second, and it's showing the energetic response of the brain, which is pretty much the precursor to driving the chemical responses in the brain, and the neurochemicals and the hormones and the genetic responses and the changes. And then when those changes are created, it's also measuring what those changes are, this new structural function, the neuroplasticity. So we use that to see what's going on in the brain. And then we also look at the response in the body, because as soon as you have an experience like this conversation now, your mind is taking these energy waves, sound waves, light waves, and so on, gravitational fields, processing it into the brain. Your psychology part of your mind is thinking, feeling, and choosing around what you're hearing. All of this is put in the brain. All this energy stuff happens, and proteins form and the trees grow. And that changes the brain. That then immediately sends an instruction down to the body. And in every cell of the body, we have these little, for want of a simple explanations, like a whole lot of beads that are sewn up together and then rolled into almost like a little blanket. So if you imagine lots and lots of beads being threaded together and rolled up, those are called microtubules, and every protein is holding information. And so in the brain, it's a tree like structure. In the cells, it's like a rolled up little sort of beaded blanket. And in the mind, it's a wave. Like if you're looking at a podcast, you see a wave. So every experience is going in triplicate, and each with a different level of impact. And the three work together, influencing how you show up. So if you're having a toxic experience, then it's this very jagged gravitational field in the mind. and that's moving through the entire body. It's not outside, it's around and all of us. It's through the entire body. This is why our heart palpitates, and we get this nervous reaction, and we feel things in our bodies because it's going through the entire body. It then builds in the brain and immediately starts almost synonymously the experience builds into those little wired up blankets. And if it's toxic, the tree is not going to look like a beautiful, lush green tree. It's going to look like something toxic, like a broken, burnt tree, very much alive. Sort of the in the Lord of the Rings or something. Think of those trees that were so scary, something like that. And those rolled up blankets aren't rolled up; they start unrolling, and that then creates a vulnerability in the brain and a vulnerability in the body. And then we can pick up that kind of vulnerability through how the immune system responds. So then we pick up things like increased cortisol, increased ACTH, increased DHEA, changes in prolactin levels, changes in telomeres, which are the ends of chromosomes, which influence cell division. In other words, we'll see signs in our biology of that disruption. When those things start unwinding from that toxic tree's instructions, then that's when we start seeing vulnerability in our body, and then disease states start setting into our body over time. That's the whole psychoneurobiological process. And now that process we can recognize, with our wise mind, we can train ourselves to recognize all those signals. Then we can learn to do something about those signals, which is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and for anybody that wants a visual representation, check out the video of episode 67, which I'll link down in the show notes, because last time you were on, you had these great
Oh yeah, all the images
trees
are
where you kind of showed the healthy mind with the healthy trees, and then you kind of showed these dead trees. So give some people kind of some visual, representation of kind of what you were just explaining there. But I want to get into kind
sorry
of
I don't have
recognizing this. Go
Frank,
ahead.
I'm sorry I don't have them now. I'm actually in Miami at the moment, and they're in my studio in Dallas. So I apologize. I don't have
Oh
all of
no,
them.
no, it's no issue at all. We like I said, we had that on the on the previous episode. And for those who listen on the audio, I highly recommend checking out that episode if you haven't yet after today. But in terms of recognizing and assessing these things, you mentioned, it gets to the point where it begins to kind of show up in our biology, like kind of an unhealthy body. I want to get into how can we begin to recognize these things prior to it manifesting in the physical side.
A great question. So we need to train ourselves in mind management. We need to manage our minds. So the messy mind needs to be managed by the wise mind, and that wise mind is the core of our humanity. It's that deep spiritual wisdom. And an example of our wise mind is someone comes to you and asks you for some advice, and you listen to their story and you give them great advice. And you think, geez, why don't I take that advice myself, kind of thing. We're really good at seeing other people's issues. And, we're not always so good at like seeing our own and giving ourselves, taking our own advice. And that's a skill we need to learn. We need to learn to listen to that inner core wisdom and become listeners. And that also comes from like listening to podcasts like yours and learning all this, because the more knowledge that you build, the more you listen, you're actually wiring that into your brain. So along with the experiences of life, we are also wiring in knowledge all the time. And our wise mind will draw down on the knowledge that is good for you. And that's why continued learning is absolutely essential for optimal functioning. So following podcasts like yours and mine are great, because we're giving information that's very much building in the insurance policy networks in our brain that guide us. With this non-conscious mind being so alert at helping to identify the toxicity in us, it'll send these signals through. So the first point of training yourself to listen to the non-conscious mind is to practice the skill of listening to your signals. And we have 4 categories of signals. And those categories of signals are our emotions. Emotions are not illnesses. Emotions are incredibly important. Uh, Behaviors, what you say and do and how you say and do it. Your bodily sensations, what your body's telling you, and then your perspectives, how you're looking at life. Those are 4 categories, and obviously they can expand into a multitude of different behaviors and emotions and all that kind of thing. So think of for a moment, just come away from the signals and pretend my hands are scales. Those like old fashioned with a balancing thing in the middle, and you put, you're buying something from those old fashioned shops, and they put the cheese in one side to weigh the
Oh,
amount
and
of
it
cheese.
bounces it. Yeah.
These scales, and then it kind of bounces, and they put weights on the one side. So that's the visual I want you to imagine now. And now all our experiences we have on this side, we've got all our good experiences, and this side, all our bad experiences. And there's a bad, when we're managing our mind via observing our signals and doing all the things that I'm starting to explain, you keeping this balance, because the bad stuff is also telling you stuff. It's not that you want to eliminate the bad stuff. We want to be able to learn from the bad stuff and make it work for us. We want it to become constructive. Because what happens is the bad stuff can get us stuck in guilt, and we don't know how to manage it. So we start tipping, and the scale starts tipping, and then we can dive deep into negative things. So in this side and in this side, we have emotions, we have behaviors, we have perspectives, and we have bodily sensations. On this side, we would have things like depression and bipolar behaviors, and I'm giving extreme states, life sucks, and extreme pain in one's body or something. Now, that's also still, we mustn't see those as bad. We must see those as information. This side would be like good things, like happiness and body feeling great and life's going whatever. So a great conversation like this where we're learning and that sort of thing. So what we want to do, in life with mind management is look at our signals that we are getting. When we get the good signals, don't just gloss over a great conversation or something that pops your mind that just makes you happy. Like, for example, my granddaughter, I just think of her face and it makes me happy. I won't just let it pass through in 1 second. I'll actually stop and take 5 seconds to visualize and recall what it felt like when I saw her for the first time or something like that. And that wires in a network into my brain that is increasing my resilience and unmasking my resilience. So you want to pay attention to the good stuff when you get signaled, when it pops to your mind. You also want to pay attention to the bad stuff, because the bad stuff has also got information. And if you grab it, you control it, and then you're empowered to change it and to make it work for you. Otherwise, it will drag you down and keep you down there. So instead of saying, "Oh, I'm so bad, I'm doing this," because I know you help a lot of men with pornography addiction and that kind of thing. Any kind of addiction is basically a coping, it's a behavior. So in this particular scale, pornography addiction would be a behavior. And then there's emotions that go with it, which are guilt, desire, all kinds of things. There's bodily sensations, we can guess what those are. And then there's perspective. Why do I always do this? I'm stuck in this. So that's just a very, very broad example. So instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so bad, I shouldn't do this," which can start tipping the scales and will just actually make you worse and make the addiction worse. What we need to do is say, okay, well, I recognize that it's a mess. It's okay to be a mess. I'm being messy in this. What can I learn from that? Let me identify those emotions. And then what you do is you start a process. So that's the frame. I've set up the frame, sort of the frame. Now you start the process of saying, okay, what are my actual emotions in this moment? Don't think of in general, just think in this moment where I'm feeling a bit stuck. And then, just say my emotions are, I feel whatever. It could be guilt, it could be remorse, it could be desire, whatever. Just label them, no judgment, just very clinical, very organized, very deliberate. Then you would go to, what are my behaviors in this moment? Once again, just create a sentence. What is my perspective in the moment? What are my bodily sensations in the moment? As you do that, you are gathering awareness of these 4 categories of signals of how you are in this particular moment. You've now you've now listened to the non-conscious, because those signals are basically the non-conscious scanning, finding a thought tree and sending up those signals that are attached to that thought tree. So as you pay attention to them, you bring that thought tree into consciousness. That thought tree is that thing that looks like a tree in your brain, and those rolled up things in your body, whatever, everything's activated. And as soon as we know from neuroscience, as soon as you are aware of a thought pattern, not all the details yet, but you've weakened the thought pattern. So you are weakening that network, and that network's what's driving you. So you use the signals to find the network. You then, by doing that, by paying attention, gathering awareness, you then bring it into the conscious mind and you weaken it. Now you are being empowered to take control. So now you go to the next stage, which is now you reflect. Okay, why do I have that emotion? What other emotions do I have? And you ask the why question around the 4 signals. Then you write that down. And when you write down, it's really important not to write like a journal. Don't go writing whole sentences. If you really want to dig deep and get insight and really activate that network that you can deconstruct it and reconstruct it right down to the roots being the source of where this thing started in the first place, the trunk being how you processed it uniquely, the branches being how it's playing out in your life, and the self-talk and all that stuff. You want to dig deep. So the first 2 stages are helping open the door. It's like literally the door is locked. We can try all kinds of CBT, all kinds of great motivational affirmations, etc. We will not open the door until you go through a very sequential process that aligns with the psychoneurobiological network how it needs to be woken up so that you can rewire. And these steps I'm describing to you are doing that. So the first step, gather awareness, opens the door, brings the thought into consciousness, weakens the networks, the proteins, etc., and the chemicals. Then the second step, adds to that weakening. And weakening means you can change it. It becomes malleable. Things that are malleable are changeable because you're now deconstructing. And then you're deconstructing right down to the root, which is the source. And then you can reconstruct. You can't eliminate, but you can deconstruct and reconstruct, which is reconceptualizing. So you always remember what happened to you, what you did, how you were, but you're now changing what it looks like. So you're changing how it drives you and therefore how it plays out into your future. So the third step is adding to this ability to do all of this stuff, and that's the right step. And it's important, as I mentioned, not to write in a journal stage. You can do that later, but not now. Now, what you do is just a mind dump. Whatever comes up, you just grab that. So from the gather and reflect, it's stimulated a lot. And you just write as quick as you can all over the page, preferably all over the page, not in lines. If you want to put something like write a sentence, put it in a bubble, try and write the words. And I know it sounds crazy, but the more patterned, the more colorful, the more you're going to go deeper and create a synergy in the network that digs deeper. Then you're going to stop, and fourth step is you're going to look at what you've written to make sense. What's going on here? What are the patterns, the triggers? This is what's happened. What can I do about this? And so on. Then the fifth step is what's the action I'm going to take today? Now, that is a neurocycle. It's 5 steps of the neurocycle. And that is basically the system for how we can change drive neuroplasticity, which is the changes we want to make in our whole psychoneurobiological network, not just the brain, the mind, brain, and body. And so the neurocycle is how you do that. It's the system, and within that you can put positive affirmations, cognitive behavior techniques, those kinds of things fit at step 5. Those are your actions. But if you don't have the prior steps, those actions become a band aid. But if you put them at step 5, they become a solution. And so there's a huge difference there. So that's basically how you would start managing the process. Key thing here is if we've got an established pattern, and if you've been doing it for more than one day, then and most likely most addictions have been going on for months, if not years. That's going to require time to change. So habits don't form in 21 days. They also aren't changed in 21 days. From the research I've done and others, and we're doing a huge amount of research in this area, and I've just published a paper, we're about to publish another paper, we've got a big study running, another paper going at the end of the year. We have been looking, myself and my team, at how long does it actually take to go from that signal, find the root, deconstruct, reconstruct, all that stuff. And it's around about 9 weeks for one cycle. And in that one cycle, that's like one chunk. And you'd work for using the NeuroCycle daily for around 5 to 45 minutes. I wouldn't go longer than 45 because it's very, very tiring and your brain will run out of energy like a cell phone, and your conscious mind. And 5 minutes is kind of the minimum because you've got to get through 5 steps. And some days you'll do 5 minutes, some days you'll do 15. It depends on where you are in that cycle. The first 3 weeks are very overwhelming, very, you grieve, you feel more anxious, more depressed, your emotions are going to be high because you're starting to see stuff and it's very overwhelming and you're starting to deconstruct. By more or less 3 weeks, you're feeling a level of peace and you have a direction you want to go in. So you've healed the roots and you've started growing what you would like to be, that new thought you'd like it to be. So there's this new little thought, it's this big, not big, and how you were functioning is kind of half the tree, and how you want to function is the other half. If you stop here, you're going to revert back and get very stuck and get very frustrated. So what you need to do is before you start a new cycle, before you just think you've got it, you need to grow that tree and you need to reduce that side, that's the toxic side, down to just a teeny little branch and make it a nice big green tree. And that requires practicing this each day through the 5 steps for another at least 42 days, another 6 weeks. And I mean that this is honestly that's a 2 to 5 minute process. So the second part is very quick, but you've still got to go through the 5 steps. That grows the tree, the strength of the healthy part reduces the toxic part to a very small, tiny little branch so that you can remember you may be triggered, but you now have the healthy tree that's thoughts, retrieving all the memories and thoughts, a new way of thinking, the new network is now going to be the one that drives you. And sometimes if it's a long-standing trauma, because addictions generally grow out of trauma, and trauma is big stuff. It's what's happened to us, the sexual, the verbal, the war trauma, all these bullying, excessive bullying, all those kinds of toxic breakdowns that happen to us, poverty, racism, etc. Those are big, and the more complex, the longer they've been there, the more neurocycles you need to do. So you're not going to get away with one neurocycle one day and think you're better. That doesn't work like that. So it's kind of that. That's kind of the big picture of the whole thing. I've got an app called the NeuroCycle app, which I think we spoke about last time. With the NeuroCycle, the system I've described, the 5 steps is the NeuroCycle. It's all scientific. And the app, I literally give you therapy and I walk you through the process. And there's also decompression activities in there, mini neurocycles. So when things get overwhelming, you can decompress, and mini neurocycles for this to get you through the day. And then there's the book that you interviewed me about last time that has got all this in detail. So that's kind of, if people think, yeah, I need some help, it's a lot. I've said a lot. There are tools out there to help you get through this.
Yeah, guys, and we'll get, like I said, we'll link down the previous episode. We'll have all of the links for the previous books and the NeuroCycle app here as well. I'm curious about maintenance though after this kind of 9-week kind of reset, or this 9-week cycle, right? I mentioned at the beginning, I come from the health and fitness background. You see a lot of people go through these yo-yo diets. It's like they go on these crash diets for 30 days, maybe 12 weeks. They reach their end goal, then they pull the carpet out and everything they've done that produced the results, and then before they know it, they're back in the same place or even worse. Or you see it in the business, realm as well. I do a lot of coaching with entrepreneurs. You see somebody had a massive month, like they crush it, 100K in the month or whatever, and then they stop doing the things that produce the success, and then they don't, it wakes them up 3 months down the road when revenue has kind of come to a halt. Like if we go through this 9-week period, but then we stop doing these things, what happens, and what type of maintenance cycle is required with a neurocycle?
Brilliant, brilliant question. Thank you for asking that, Frank. It's a really important question. Okay, so essentially, the 9 weeks is going to, in that second part of the 9 weeks, so the first phase is 3 weeks, the second phase is 6 weeks. That is going to get that thought that drives you into a place where it's big and strong. So it's competing with a lot of other thoughts. So it's got to have a level of strength. When you're dealing with a big thing, one, as I mentioned, one neurocycle is not going to be enough. In the process of doing the second part, the phase two, you're going to start seeing, okay, there's another weak spot. So I need to do another neurocycle on that. And so it goes through. So your maintenance comes in with, as you finish one, you go into another. As you finish one, you go into another. It's kind of an ongoing growth period, because one experience in our life that has changed us has many connections in the brain network, mind, brain, body network. And so the idea is, this is a life skill. This is not something you go and do once. Oh, I did your app. And people say to me, oh, I did your app. Then I know they didn't do it properly, because it's very clear in the app that this is not something that you just stop and start. I always am busy with a neurocycle. And I've been in the field for 38 years. I do it when I'm putting my makeup on. That's when I do my daily maintenance. And I'm always, every 63 days, I'm working on something and working on building up whatever. And so I'm almost coming to the end of a neurocycle where I've been learning how to put up a certain type of boundary that I needed in my life that I didn't have. And it's taken me a full 9 weeks to get to the point where I actually am seeing the fruits of that playing out in my life. Also, in terms of maintenance, what we do with our clinical studies is we always follow up. We do it over a 6-month period. So we'll do a 63-day cycle, and then we will check up 3 months later. So from start to finish of the research trial, it'll be a 6-month period. And that's a good measure. And what we see when people have continued to just keep doing the neurocycle, and even if it's something that's not quite related, but it's, oh, I also need to work on this. So by keeping into that lifestyle, we will see massive change at the 3-month mark later, which is at point six, at the 6-month mark. And that's where we see people that have used it continuously, they are maintaining that new change, and they've grown even more. They've optimized it even more. The ones that half-heartedly did the neurocycle in the 9 week and half-heartedly carried on, we didn't see the same kind of results. We saw tremendous awareness, but we saw lots of crashes. So it's kind of like flying a plane. This is a great analogy to explain this whole concept. If you think of flying a plane, the pilot, co-pilot, and engineer have to do a lot of preparation before they get on the plane and with the tower. It's not just jumping in. So we have to prepare our brain. And just prior to doing the neurocycle, we prepare our brain. And those are the things that everyone's familiar with: breathing, meditation, etc. In my neurocycle app, I have a 2 to 3 minute brain preps that you do before you do the 5 minutes, the 5 steps. The brain preparation is important for getting your psychoneurobiology aligned and prepared for the hard work of moving forward. Now, the reason I stress that is because in a lot of today's talk wellness industry, there's a lot of talk of doing meditation, doing breathing, and I'm all for that. But those are the equivalent of preparing the plane. So if you want to go somewhere and you only prepare the plane, you don't go anywhere. So that's what worries me, and what the research is showing is that, yes, it's great to calm you down in the moment, it's great to, but it's not taking you forward. So people stay stuck. Then the next phase is that pilot's got to take off. And taking off is not some random process. It's so structured and guided and organized. And that's what you'll notice about the NeuroCycle. To get this mind brain body network changing, your psychoneurobiological network to change, it's a very structured, planned, and guided process. So that's the same principle applying. So now the pilot takes off. But if the pilot does not know how to fly, the pilot's going to crash. So taking off is the equivalent of the gather awareness. So if I prepare my brain and do nothing else, I stay on the ground. I don't progress. I just keep band-aiding my life. If I prepare my brain and I take off, which is gathering awareness of the five signals, I'm taken off. That's great. I'm extremely aware of my issues and what's going on. But if I just stay there, I'm going to crash. Now, people get into those cycles, and this is what you were referring to earlier on when people, the cycles, they start the yo yo dieting and all that kind of thing. I'm going to do it. They take off, but they don't fly. They don't know how to fly. They don't go beyond, so they keep crashing. And that leads to a lot of increased anxiety. So what we've got to do is fly the plane. So what do we do once you've taken off? Fly the plane. So steps 2, 3, and 4 are flying the plane. So these reflect, the right and the recheck of flying the plane. So it's going beyond awareness. And then the active reach is to land the plane. If I know how to fly, but I can't land the plane, I'm also going to crash. So you have to have that action to seal it. So that's just a great analogy to show, why to keep people in that. They had a great month. They made the 100K. What did they do? What was the lifestyle that they created? Otherwise, what's happening is they're taking off. They had a bit of success. They flew a bit, and then they crashed. And then that's, they don't. And it's also okay to crash. We're going to crash because we're going to learn. We have to. And that's why one of the key things I say to people is it's okay to be a mess. That's really critical.
It's almost, I mean, a requirement for the human experience, right? And I love going back to kind of what you were talking about. It's like the ability that, or the need to be present in every moment, be present in the good and recognize it, but also be present in some of those down periods, be present in the moments of depression, be present in the moments of sadness, because it's the polarity of those two experiences that for me is what's creating this life. So I think so many people are devoid of the ability to be present because we have this world that is a constant stimuli. Like how much of just the world and the way that it's created is creating the mental health crisis that we're in right now.
Well, absolutely, it's a huge contributor, but the mental health crisis is a symptom. It's not the issue. It's the symptom of a bigger issue, and the bigger issue is mind management. So social media is not bad, AI is not bad. But it's how we're managing them. It's knowing how. Okay, that's bad. I have enough knowledge to recognize that content is destructive content, or I'm spending too long on this. That's the skill we need to be teaching ourselves and our children. Is mind management is absolutely critical. And so I say the crisis is more along the lines of mind management. Mental health is a symptom. And every generation faces something. We're facing technology as a lifestyle, and we need to understand it and how to manage that because that is going to create feeling of angst, feeling of and your unconscious is constantly warning you. So we misreading the warning signals. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, I've got a mental health issue. Oh, I'm diseased. No, you're not diseased. If you tune in and slow down and get with yourself and listen and tune in, you can read the information that depression is not a disease. It is information that is telling you something about what's going on in your life that you need to pay attention to. And this is something we can teach our children as young as 2 and 3. My youngest patients were 2 and 3 years of age. My own 4 adult children grew up with this stuff. And that's why I brought out this book currently, this How to Help Your Child Clean Up Their Mental Mess, which you held up in the beginning. It is to help parents, teachers, caregivers, grandparents, whoever, to help children develop the mental skills to be able to process what they're being exposed to. Because it's very overwhelming when they don't know how to talk or tell their story or process the feelings that they're having from the things that they're seeing and the things that they're hearing. Creates tremendous overwhelm and confusion, and then can wire in, it's all getting wired in, but it gets wired in a toxic way. And even prior to all the huge advances in technology, just anyone who is watching, think back to your childhood. We know adverse, unmanaged childhood experiences will create chronic physical and mental health challenges. So this book is also geared, and this concept is also geared to help adults who have reached that place where they realize they're in trauma to get back to the inner child and do some inner child work as well.
Yeah, let's take a pivot here and talk about the book here. You just held it up recently. I opened up at the beginning as well. How to help your child clean up their mental mess, which is piggybacking off of your previous book, Clean Up Your Mental Mess. You mentioned that this can work for children as young as 2 years old, and I know there's going to be some parents that be like, Caroline, what are you talking about? Like, my child doesn't know right from left. They don't know up from down. How are they going to be able to understand what's going on in their mind? Like, what do you say to a parent that's kind of got that type of view and in objection to something like this?
Okay, absolutely. Great question. And also there might be uncles and aunts out there that are listening and grandparents or teachers, or you may not have children or never want, but you never know. You may speak into a child's life and give them some tools or whatever. So basically, I have a character that I created. You would have seen it in the book, Frank, the little Brainy character that's throughout the book. So there's a cartoon version of this little character that I've created. Actually, I've got a toy as well. Let me show the toy. And it's called Brainy. And the reason it's called brainy is because your brain doesn't control you, you control your brain. So there's a lot of subtle messaging here for a child to understand that, those thought trees go in your brain. So when that person's bullying you at school, or that something happens at daycare with a really young 2 or 3 or 4 year old, that is going in the brain. And you can show 2, 3, and 4 year olds, and I've got it all laid out in the book with developmental tables and cartoons. And you can say that when you played so nicely with your friend, that's a happy tree in your brain. And the maybe the sibling teasing them or taking their toy or something like that made them sad, it's an unhappy tree in the brain. And this is Brainy, and Brainy is the superhero who walks the mental health journey with the child and has a superpower called the NeuroCycle. Now you can teach kids as young as 2 and 3 about the fact that you feel sad. Let's have a look at you. It's very good for a 2 year old. I'll just demonstrate this for a 2 and 3 year old, even a 4 year old. For them to talk about themselves is hard. So you talk about Brainy as though it's them. So you say, I see Brainy's crying and Brainy's so sad and Brainy's rubbing his tummy and Brainy's kicking the car seat and Brainy won't eat his food and Brainy's yelling or whatever. I wonder what's wrong with Brainy. And that opens the door to a collaborative communication where the child now has something that is going to help them express themselves. And then you go through the neurocycle with them. Obviously, not right when you're driving, but back home. Once you're back home in a place, you can choose an area in your house, keep it as a consistently designated area that where you work on your mind. And you, as the parent, adult, uncle, aunt, whatever, you use it. So if you're having a bad day, you go sit there on that chair, you pick up Rainy and say, "Oh, I'm having such a bad day," and this happened. Obviously, language appropriate, so that the child sees the adults in their life are messy, and that's okay. And this is what they do. They have a plan, something. They go through these things, and then so they see you doing it. The biggest help for a child with mental health is to see an adult managing their own mental health and demonstrating. Then you can start walking the child through all the signals, and I give you all the questions to ask and all the little tables, and you use objects and you use cut out pictures, and you can teach a child. It takes a little bit of time, obviously. This is not a quick fix. This is a lifestyle. As a parent or adult or whoever's looking after kids, you have to understand the process for yourself. I'd recommend getting the app, potentially my other book, along with this book. You can teach yourself from this book to learn the system, practice it yourself, let your child see you demonstrating it, and then you can use the language appropriate questions and the images and the cartoons for the younger child, the older child. You can then explain it. I see you feeling sad, or I've noticed that you don't want to eat your food. I noticed that when you look at your phone, you look up at me and you seem very, very sad. And maybe you want to show me what you're looking at, and let's talk about those accounts that you're looking at. If you're 8, 9, and 10 year old, you can have those kinds of conversations and say that that doesn't feel right in your body. It doesn't feel right in your. This is what you're doing, and no judgment, but just you describing. You're not diagnosing. You're helping them to have the tools to be able to explain and say what they're feeling. So as you collaboratively, it's very co-regulated initially, where you're providing the pictures and the words, and they kind of working along with you, and then they slowly but surely get more and more independent, and over time it becomes a life skill. I did this for years in therapy. 25 years I practiced. I did a lot of family therapy. I've taught this to thousands over the years. And it's hard at first because you have to learn a new skill, like anything. Go to the gym, you learn a new skill. But we seem to accept it when it comes to sports and playing instruments and that kind of thing, that takes time. When it comes to the mind, we want a quick fix, we want a tablet. So it's not. The mind drives everything, as we spoke in the beginning. So it takes time to actually learn how to manage the mind. And we have a little coloring book as well, which makes it super easy. So the coloring book and the Brainy go nicely with the book as a sort of toolkit for children.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I love what you said there, right? It's like start with yourself first, dedicate the space within your home, start working on these things yourself, and the child will want to follow. I literally put a post up on social media this afternoon speaking to the fathers like out there, like your children are going to see some of these things early on in life, and you got to begin to get in front of these things, but you also have to get it out of your life first, because that's not going to come across authentically. You see it all the time with like the dad that's working out in the garage. He's got the little kind of 4-year-old kind of, behind him, like pushing the little dumbbells. I got to assume it's going to be the same thing, right? Like if you take this dedicated space in the house, you set up the chair, you make it nice and cozy, and then mom and dad are over there and they're like, the kid's gonna be like, hey, what are you doing? I want to be involved in that. It's the perfect opportunity to bring them into it. And now you have these tools paired with the book to actually be able to speak the child language where they're going to pick some of these things up.
It's exactly, you said it beautifully there. So that's the mind, the gym in the garage, so dedicated space, the child with that. We're teaching the same thing. Now we're talking about a mind gym, literally. We're talking, a designated space with designated space. I've been talking all day, apologies. Where you're doing the same thing and you're teaching your child that skill. And let's say mom and dad have an argument, or the two partners, husband, or however it works, is have a argument. This is the ideal place not to go behind closed doors, because that doesn't teach the child anything, and they'll immediately think it's their fault, because kids are way more insightful than we realize, and they read body language better than adults and all kinds of things. This is your chance to sit together in that designated space and say, I'm so sorry, mom and dad had an argument. We shouted, this, so you can walk through the NeuroCycle and show the resolution, your active reach. But we did this and we're doing this and we love each other and hug. That teaches a child, wow, something massive about relationships. And in that fourth step, the recheck, that's where you invite the collaboration. When your children start seeing you, if you have art supplies out and have a little basket next to this nice place where you've got all the toys and artwork and art supplies, and you could even paint a wall with chalk paint. And you actually sit there and you get to the point where step 3 and you haul out the little art pad and you start writing down, what you and the husband and wife were fighting about, or the partners were fighting about and arguing about, and you show, and then you do the recheck where you look at what you've written, and that's when they'll come and say, oh, I want to see that. Oh, why don't you try this? Children will offer advice, and very often it's that simple, beautiful advice that you think, why didn't I think of that? It's so simple, but so powerful. You've created deep, meaningful connection. You've taught your kids relationship skills. You've taught them problem solving. I mean, it's all the things that you need to cope as an adult. You're modeling and teaching them in the home, safe and home environment.
So beautiful. Caroline, tell the guys where they can obviously pick up the book. I know it's available on Amazon, but do we want to drive them to your site? Where's the coloring book available? Where's the Brainy doll available? And where's the best place to maybe connect with you? I know you mentioned podcast, social media, plug all that stuff. We'll bring the conversation to a close. But it's been such an honor. This has been a true masterclass in a very short, condensed time, guys. Hopefully you took some notes. You saved this one. But yeah, Caroline, where can they find everything, and where can the gentleman connect with you?
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Caroline Leaf is all my social media handles, and you can get from there to everything. The NeuroCycle is the app. We have a web version. It's also on iTunes and Google Play. My website is drleaf.com. We have a store there, and you can get Brainy, the coloring book. There's kits there. The book you can get there. All my books you can get there as well. You can get books wherever books are sold, but we have everything on our site with all kinds of specials and that kind of thing. And then the podcast is called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess.
Yeah, awesome. Guys, we'll have all that plugged down in the show notes here. Last question, Dr. Leaf. We like to end every single show here with the same question. Title here is obviously called The Superhuman Life. For me, living a superhuman life is really a belief system, or it's how I try to show up in the world every day. And it's coming from the place, and I know you and I agree on this, that we're placed here for meaning and purpose. So there's a calling on each and every single one of our lives, but we can't stop there. We must be very intentional about our growth, about our development, and about cleaning up our mental mess so that we can actually bring that purpose into service to others across the world. So Dr. Leaf, as we end today's conversation, how would you define living a superhuman life?
I would define it by realizing that we have the power to change, which is very scientific. So we can't change what's happened to us, but we can change what it looks like inside of us, and therefore how it plays out into our future.
Love that, guys. You're not a victim of your circumstances. You are in power. Pick up the book, connect with Dr. Caroline Leaf. Her podcast is incredible, guys. So we love you guys. If you got value out of this, make sure to share it. Leave us a review. But for Dr. Leaf, Frank Rich, your host here. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.